Hey there guys, welcome back for another Indomitus painting video. This week taking a look at painting my Dark Angels Chaplain. Now obviously the majority of Chaplain's armour is black and just a little bit of detailing or colouring to show the chapter that they are from, at least in the cases that I've seen. So starting off here, obviously I've gone and primed this with Chaos Black, and I've got the base made up. You can see some of the sand colour showing through where the primer hasn't fully covered it, but not too worried about that. That'll be fixed later on. Now at this point he's not fully fixed to the base, as obviously I want to be able to paint underneath him. So he can be removed from the base, and you'll notice that he doesn't have his backpack on, obviously just so I can get to those areas a little bit easier. So all I'm doing to start with is putting in some flat highlight area. This is using a 2-part mix Eshin Grey to 1 part Abaddon Black, and this will give us a nice dark grey with that slightly blue tint that Eshin Grey has to it. And all I'm doing with this is going over the majority of the areas on the armour where the light would catch. I find pure black armour left as black with just some highlights never quite looks right. Personally, I like to have my armour look like it's got some definition to it. So what I'll usually do is grey up the armour slightly with black in the recesses, obviously, and then that slightly dark grey or slightly grey black tone to everything else. It's not a huge amount, it's not going to stand out brightly. This is thinned down as well, so some of that black undertone will show through, and what I'll do is build it up a little bit to get the the hue that I want of that grey mix. So obviously just going over all the black areas, the the flats of the top to the feet, flat pieces of armour and stuff like that. What I am doing is making sure to not go right up to the recesses and things like that, to leave a darker outline around things. Obviously if it's a raised area, then that will go right up to an edge. If it has an edge up against it, or a groove or something, then that'll have, obviously I'll leave that area in the black. So yeah, first thing to do really is just go around the entire model, applying this dark grey mix to anywhere that is essentially black. So I'll get on with this and we will be back in just a flash. Okay, so now that I've had a few thin layers applied to the armour of the Eshin Grey black mix, I'm going over a few times in certain areas to bring that up to a little bit more of a grey. I'm now going over with some pure Eshin Grey, and I'm adding the first layer of edge highlights. For this I'll go around almost everything, all edges, including both sides of the groove that is cut into the back of his leg plates and things like that. The idea of this is to give that first level of highlight. This will go into some of the darker areas, under the legs and things like that, as that will be reflective highlights, with the extreme highlights being left to the more exposed areas on the outer parts of the body and such. But for now, yeah, just the pure Eshin Grey going around. I like the Eshin Grey for this, as it does have that slight blue tint to it. Occasionally I will mix in maybe a little bit of Cantor blue or something, just to take it a little bit more towards the blue side, or you could add any kind of colour really, to tint that grey a little bit more towards a cooler or warmer tone. So obviously if you add sort of reds or purples, you're going to make it a little bit warmer. If you add blues, greens, things like that, you're going to make it a little bit cooler. So yeah, obviously a lot of this will be panel lining, so anywhere where you've got two panels sort of meet or overlap, you'll get this highlight there, as it's not a full highlight, it's anywhere where light would bounce off of those surfaces, obviously with the extreme highlight being done in a lighter tone. So again, I'll get on with this and catch you guys in a sec. Okay, so next up for the almost final layer of highlight, I'm taking some Dawnstone, and as you can see there, I'm just mixing in a little bit of that Eshin Grey, just to tone it down slightly. And what I'm going to do now is apply this to any areas where light would be most reflective. So obviously staying away from sort of the inside of the legs, under the arms and things like that. This will be more towards the edge of plates and things like that. What I'm doing here is just inside these panels, that was a little bit too much, so just wiping some away there, but inside these panels on his leg, I wanted a slight highlight just between the recess of the panel, or that darker edge where it becomes the what will later be the gold area, and the sort of the grey middle tone, just to make it stand out a little bit more. And then obviously everywhere else is just a case of adding these small lines. You'll notice here I'm doing dots on some areas. This is to break up that highlight a little bit. It just adds a little bit more texture to the surfaces, so that you don't get just a straight smooth line. You'll get a bit more of a textured line along the area. There's not much of a gap between these dots. They are almost touching. Even in most cases they are touching. It just adds a little bit more of a blob instead of a straight clean line, which I think for highlights, just to me personally, looks better. A lot of the edges, if I'm sort of straight lining it, I'll use the side of the brush, even when I'm dotting it, and just pull straight down along the edge of the line using the side of the tip. There's not a lot of paint on the brush, just enough to get a couple of lines, and then obviously I'll apply some more paint to the brush. That way you don't run the risk of blobbing too much on. If obviously an area does end up with a little bit too much highlight on it, the beauty of this is I can take some of that Eshin Grey and black mix, and I can go back over the darker area and bring it just onto that edge highlight, to darken it up and make it a neater line, which I will do in some instances later on. So obviously coming to the inside of the leg there, you can see that I'm just staying on the outside edges. In terms of vertical lines, I will always do both edges as long as it's on the outside edge. Obviously with horizontal lines, I will only do the top of the bottom line, if that makes sense. If you see the horizontal line that goes across the back of his leg plate, you've got that groove. I will only edge highlight with this brighter paint along the top of the bottom half of that groove. So the two sides will get the Eshin Grey, and then the bottom edge will get the highlight, and this is because of the way that light would reflect off of that bottom edge, but not off of the corner of the top edge, if that makes sense. If you guys want to see a little bit more of an in-depth video of that, let me know down in the comments, and I'll do maybe just a small section of plate armor rather than voiceover, and I can show you and explain as I do it exactly what I mean. That may be easier for you guys to understand. You'll notice a lot of my edge highlighting, I do prefer to do this dotted method. Most of the time I'll only do it with black. I will occasionally do it with colours, but yeah, generally I prefer to do it with black highlighting rather than using, you know, if I was to do it with like green or red armour, then I'd do a more cleaner line. Anyway, we'll jump on ahead and get on with the next steps. Okay, so with the black armour done, I'm now taking some Caliban green and thinning this down with a bit of water. I do have 2 pots of water. I don't know if you've noticed this in previous videos. The egg cup water there is clean water purely for mixing, and then my wash pot is just out of camera shot, just so I'm not using dirty water to thin my paints. Anyway, with the Caliban green thinned down, what I'm doing is starting from what will be the darker areas towards the top, as it gets nearer his waist. I'm pulling down and depositing the majority of the paint towards the bottom of the robe. This is obviously the area that is going to be brightest. I'm using, again, very thin down paints, almost a glaze consistency, and I'm going to build this up, starting slightly further down the robe each time, coming towards the bottom and continually brightening up that bottom until it's almost pure Caliban green in tone. Obviously keeping out of the recesses, leaving that the dark. I may go in with a single run of the thin Caliban just to give it a slight green tint, but for the most part that will be left black. I want a very dark green effect to the shadow areas, with a slightly brighter area for the highlights. This method will be the same for the shoulder guards, but obviously slightly in reverse, with the highlight being up towards the domed part, the curved part at the top of the shoulder guards. So when it comes to painting this, I'll turn the model upside down and then start with what would be the bottom of the shoulder guard, and work my way towards the highlighted area with a sort of left to right motion, or as I'm doing here, pull up. Now I know this is the underside of the robe that I'm doing here, but I didn't want it pure black. I did want a little bit of tint to it, so I do go in with a couple of layers of highlight. Now you can see here I made a small mistake of going over an area that was still a little bit wet, and what that did is remove some of the paint, and that can leave sort of a stain mark there where you get this ring of black, or this dot of darker colour. What I do to fix that is very quickly just blob in a little bit of the green, and that will fill in that gap, and then I will leave it until it dries. Okay, so I'm now taking some Warpstone Glow, and I'm using this for my edge highlighting on the robes here. And obviously all I'm doing is just carefully lining down those sharp folds and creases, sticking more to the left side, as that's where I want my light source to be coming from. And obviously there will be some highlight in certain areas. You can see I'm dabbing it away there just to sort of pull some of that paint away and make it a little less visible. What I'm doing now is thinning down the paint and applying a crosshatch effect over the larger flat panel of the cloth here. I'll also do it a little bit on the bit that comes just over his belt, under his chest. And what this is doing is just adding a bit of texture to the cloth. Now this is watered down, it is thinned down, so it doesn't come up too bright. It may not appear on camera, but this does give, as you build it up in layers, this will give sort of a crosshatch effect, and just to add a little bit of texture to the cloth. Obviously the warpstone glow is going to be a little bit bright, and you know, I don't want these lines showing out fully. So what I do once this is done is just with some of that thinned down Caliban green, I will just glaze over it slightly, just with a you know, 1 or 2 layers, and what this will do is blend back that crosshatch effect into the cloth a little bit and give it a little bit more of a realistic look, so that it doesn't stand out so strong. So you can see here, just straight over the top, barely any paint on there. It is thinned down, and that just tones it down slightly. Obviously this is only done on the cloth area. For the shoulder guards themselves, I leave that with just the Caliban green for the highlights there. So you can just see here, I'm just concentrating this now on the top part, and then I'll thin it down as I come towards the bottom of the shoulder guard there. I didn't want this standing out too dark for him, or too bright for him, sorry, as he does have quite dark armour, and obviously Dark Angels are, you know, a dark green anyway. So as soon as I slipped out of camera here, we'll jump on ahead and come back for the next step. Catch you guys in a bit. Okay, so I'm now applying some Morghast bone to the bone type rib lining that he has here. You know, it's typical for chaplains to have some sort of bone marks. Obviously I've gone with the helmetless head for this guy, as the Indomitus Chaplain didn't come with a skull type helmet. I don't think he did anyway. I don't remember him coming with one, which is why I'm pretty sure I went with the revealed head, as I do like chaplains with the skull helmets, and if they don't, then you know, I thought the face would make a bit of a difference. So yeah, anywhere that's going to be bone coloured will be done with this first layer of Morghast bone. So that will obviously be the skull on his left knee guard, his rib lining, and any purity seals, and the skull on his backpack that's in the centre of the spiky thing on there. Will obviously all be done with Morghast bone. Now obviously painting this over black, and keeping paints thin to get a smooth even coat, means going over you know, 3 or 4 times to get it a nice solid colour, but it's better than just throwing on one thick blob of paint. With this I am being sure to try and leave the recesses between each of these 3 ribs with that black, although that will get lined in with some wash at a later stage anyway, so I'm not too worried about getting some of that bone colour in that recess, but obviously trying to avoid it. So I'll go around, get this bone colour on, and we'll be back in just a tick. Okay, so next up I'm taking some Mephiston red and just applying this to the bolt gun that he has here. Obviously this is the base colour for the bolt gun. I'll also later on apply this to all the purity seals, though at this stage I do forget. You'll also notice that I've not done the purity seals with the Morghast bone. I'm not the most methodical painter going. I tried to sort of have some sort of order of the way that I'll do things, but generally I'll forget pieces and be like, oh no, that's got to be that colour, and then come back to it later. Not great for doing videos, but I like to show you guys how I paint, and not just as a straight up tutorial. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube, though if you would like to see set tutorial on small pieces like the gun, for example, or a piece of armor, then always let me know in the comments of any of my videos. I do try to reply to them, and any requests I will try to fulfill. So obviously, knowing what you guys want to see will help me determine what videos I make. But like I say, for the most part, my videos are a little bit sporadic, a little bit backwards and forwards, but I do try to explain it as I go. So as I've mentioned, the purity seals in this case will be done with the Morghast bone. Just at this stage I forgot. So anyway, I'll get on with the red here, and then we'll be back in just a bit. And there we go, Mephiston red done and purity seals done with the Morghast bone. So next up, I'm taking some Balthazar gold, and obviously this is going to be for all of the gold areas. In terms of gold areas, obviously, if you're painting along, or if you have this model, you can see pretty much what it's going to be anyway. But it's all of the trimming around the leg guards, around his shin, and the sort of that kneecap piece that he has. Obviously he is a Primaris Chaplain, so he has that large kneecap plate sticking up. That's obviously in gold, as well as any sort of embellishments, and his cross and his little statue and things like that he has, his chains and stuff. His chest plate, the Aquila piece, will obviously be in gold. The top of his Crozius, as well as the bottom end, the pommel piece, trims of his shoulder guards, and just sort of little spikes and embellishments and things like that will all get a layer of Balthazar gold. I prefer to varnish my models with a matte varnish. I do use gloss occasionally. Because of this, obviously gold and metallic areas, if I was to paint this just with a flat gold or Retributor arm or something like that, that natural shine is going to disappear from it due to the matte varnish, which again is another reason I will use multiple tones of gold to build up a more realistic looking tone, so that once that matte varnish dulls it all down, you'll still have that dark area of the Balthazar gold, the brighter mid-tones of the Retributor armour, and then those highlights of auric armour and a silver for edge highlighting and things like that, just so that when it's dulled down it still looks like the rest of the model. It has those edge highlights, that mid-tone, that dark tone, and I'm not relying on the metallic of the paint to give those natural highlights using real light. Anyway, like I said, all of the gold areas will take a coat of this Balthazar gold, so I will get on with that, and I will catch you guys in just a moment. Okay, so the book here, you'll notice that I left some of the trimming without the gold on there, and that's because I knew that I had to get this layer of paint on first. Here I'm using some Rhinox hide for the cover of the book, and I'll also use this on the handle for his Crozius. You'll notice that I've again missed out a purity seal there. Like I said, I'm not the most methodical of painters. I paint what I see as I see it. Try to remember. If I don't, then come back to it. And I think in some cases, a lot of us are like that. So yeah. So obviously a layer of Rhinox hide over the cover of the book here, leaving the indented, recessed symbol in the middle, and the trimming around the edge of it would be done in Balthazar gold. But obviously I wanted to get the book done first, just so I don't get any brown on that gold area. So I'll get on with that and catch you guys in a tick. Okay, so I'm now taking some lead belcher and I'm going to apply this to those metallic areas, obviously, that aren't gold. This being the magazine clip, barrel, and the little back part of the bolt gun here. I did also take a 1mm drill piece and drill into the barrel. I know some people are a stickler for having the barrels drilled out, so you know, I've done that on all my models from the Indomitus set. Silver or metallic, obviously. On the backpack I will also do the 2 exhaust vents, the sort of the roundish ones that are at the top. I'll do the trim to those and the grill that's inside them, but the actual large pieces themselves will be obviously black. And then the 4 smaller vents that sort of poke out the sides of the backpack at the bottom, I always do those in metallic lead belcher as well. As far as lead belcher goes, that's pretty much it, apart from the plate that he has in the side of his face. You'll notice that I've applied some Morghast bone to his face as well. This was just to tone down that black, because obviously when I go to do flesh tones over it, the black would not be great for those, so I've done that just to you know, have an undertone there. So I'll get on with this and catch you guys in a sec. Okay, so back to the gold. I'm now using some Retributor armor, and obviously using this as the main highlight for the majority of the gold means that obviously the majority of the gold is going to be coloured in this. The areas that I will leave Balthazar gold are obviously the inside of the legs, underarm areas, anywhere that's going to be in shadow. Though those areas will get a edge highlight of the Retributor armor, just like any other colour that I use. The mid-tone will be used as an edge highlight for those dark areas, and then the mid-tone areas will obviously have a brighter edge highlight put on. So you can see here, just catching the top of that area, and then I'll bring that down more onto the flat surface as it comes to the outside. So yeah, obviously all of the gold areas. In terms of the shoulder guards, as I've got my light source coming from the top left slightly, so the model's right, the left hand or the right hand side of verticals and things like that will have more of the Balthazar gold, with some slightly thinned down Retributor armor. Again, I use my golds the same as I use any other matte paint when doing highlights and things like that. I'll use them exactly the same, so I will have a dark tone, a mid-tone, a highlight, and then occasionally an extreme highlight, which in the case of golds will be a silver, something like what's the colour? Not lead belcher. Iron breaker, or I think it's mithril silver, something like that, for edge highlights. So obviously when it comes to painting the spikes and things like that on his armour, I'll paint obviously any side that has the highlight side of it, and then the other side will be kept with the shadow. It's just really a case of trying to think of the area the same as you would if you were using any other colour, rather than a metallic, and then applying the highlights in the same way. So I'll get on with this and catch you guys in a flash. Okay, so now the gold's the Retributor armour is done. I'm now jumping back to the book and the belt with some Doombull Brown, and obviously using this, trying to get an edge highlight and just a little bit of texture within the book. It is a very small surface, so trying to get that and in there whilst leaving some of that Rhinox hide is a little bit difficult, but the majority of the book, this is the mid-tone, so the majority of it can be this anyway, without being too much of a problem. For the belt, obviously I'll leave the Rhinox hide in the sort of the curved in part of the belt, and I'll use this for the highlights along the top and bottom of it. Again, using that sort of dotting method that I used when I was doing the grey highlights. This adds just a little bit of texture to the belt. I do have other videos where I explain doing rather rough leather texture or worn leather in a bit more detail. Again, they are part of other videos, but if you would like to see a more specific in-depth guide, let me know and I will make that up for you guys. So you can see here, first of all, just lining it, and then I'll go in and just sort of dot and texture the belt up there. Okay, so I've now finished the book and the belt, obviously adding the golds to the trims of the book in exactly the same way that I did with the armour. I'm now taking some Evil Sun's Scarlet and adding the highlights to the bolt gun here. Obviously with Purity seals, I'll leave some of that deeper red in the recess. A lot of the seals tend to have that raised outer portion, and then some of them have like a little skull or sort of that blob in the middle, so those will get the brighter red for those highlights as well. Alright, so obviously just edge highlighting around the gun with a slightly thick edge highlight, as I will go in and add an extreme highlight within that over the top. So yeah, I'll get on with this bit, won't take too long, and we'll be back in a flash. Okay, so shading time. I try not to use shades too extreme in a lot of my models. Usually I'll try to have the shades and stuff done with a darker layer of paint, but in some instances it is needed. So taking some null oil here, just applying it over the bolt gun. I'm not doing this with a thick wash. This is just pulling it against some of those sort of edges and stuff like that to get it to pull into the recesses and stuff, just to add a little bit of definition, and then using it more as a thin glaze across the red, so it's not depositing any paint properly onto the red, but just darkening it up slightly, almost like a slight glaze, I suppose. Obviously doing the his metal plate on his head there. So these are the parts of the vents that I was on about earlier, with doing them with the silver, the lead belcher. That is literally just the inside of that, and then the rim of them. Right, and for the next shade, I'm just taking some Seraphim Sepia and using this for all of the Purity seals and bone type areas. I prefer this to Agrax Earthshade for bone, as it has that slightly reddish tint to it rather than that sort of darker brown, muddier look that the Agrax Earthshade tends to have. Sorry. So yeah, over all of the Purity seals, the scrolls, banners and things like that, and also the 3 bone type ribs that he has on his armour will get a layer of this. Again, not using so much to fully fill in those flatter areas. I'll use it in the recesses, and anywhere that it does go flat I'll use it as a bit more of a glaze to just add a little bit of stain to the bone. You can see there straight away with the ribs there how it just changes that Morghast bone into a little bit more of a bone look, and deposit some of that shade into the recesses there just to separate that up. Alright, so moving back to the gold parts, I'm taking some Auric Armour Gold and using this as an edge highlight for any of the areas that had the Retributor armour, so anywhere that the light is going to hit the most. So obviously outside edges, top flat surfaces and areas like that, and yeah, just a fairly thin, not too thin, as there will be an extreme highlight added to these, but for the most part, you know, a thin, nice, even, clean edge highlight on any of those outer gold areas. So obviously if there's Balthazar gold there, it would have had a highlight of Retributor armour. It won't have a highlight of Auric gold, but if it had a flat area of Retributor armour, it will have an edge highlight of the Auric gold. So as I said, this will go over all of the gold areas, and then we will be back in just a flash. Okay, so now that the gold is almost done, I'm taking some Agrax Earthshade gloss and I thin this down with a little bit of water, and what I'm using it for is to add some sort of shadow areas, recess in the recesses and things like that. Now I don't allow this to pull too much in areas. It is, you know, it is just to get those sharp lines in between sections, especially on the Aquila like this, between the feathers and things like that. I'll also use it on flat parts of the armour as almost like a glaze to darken up where obviously where it would catch shadow and things like that. So as you can see, just at the bottom of the shoulder guards there, as they become the underpart, down this side you can see that it just adds that extra level of depth. It blends that brighter gold into that Balthazar gold at the bottom, and just adds a little bit more depth to it. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, so moving back to the gun here, just trying to get the camera in focus there. Using some Wild Rider Red, I'm now adding that extreme highlight that I was on about earlier. So very thin lines across the top here, and then usually down vertical edges, as long as obviously they're at where the light would catch. This is where the light would catch the most extreme parts of edges, hence the reason I call it extreme highlight. So yeah, just making sure to keep that line as thin as possible so that you still see some of that Evil Sun Scarlet either side of it, and then just picking off some edges. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back in just a tick. Okay, so for the final part of this model, I'm now using some Stormhost Silver. I said earlier Mithril Silver, my mistake. That is the, as far as I know it, discontinued paint. That this is the equivalent to that. So yeah, some Stormhost Silver using as extreme highlights, just those places where the light would catch the most. So anywhere right on the top of armour, and sort of the most exposed places, rivets, studs and things like that. I like to do this with, just so they stand out a little bit against the gold, and same as the the gun and things like that. Just some fine edge highlighting with this. Again, once that matte varnish is applied over it, this will help give it that sort of shiny look to it. You'll notice the face I've gone ahead and done. Due to the way that I have to do this, I couldn't get it on camera. If you'd like to know how I did it, let me know down in the comments and I will do a face painting tutorial. Obviously painting faces, not face painting real faces, but yeah, painting miniature faces with miniature paints. Yeah, face painting. Also the handle for the Crozius was done with the same method as the Mephiston Red, just not done at the same time. As I said, I'm a very backwards and forwards painter. So yeah, I'll get on with this, and with this being the final step, we will come back and look at the finished model. And there we have it, guys, the finished Chaplain. Thank you ever so much for joining me for this video. Apologies for the little hiatus that I've had recently, but I am back and I am aiming to produce a number of videos a week. If you guys have any preferences on videos you would like to see, let me know down in the comments of any of my videos, and I will be sure to try and make those for future videos for you. Obviously, with regards to the model here, I've added a few extra details that weren't in the video. For example, the white pages on the book, and some of the little detailing on the purity seals and things like that. But just by looking at them, I'm sure you can get the gist of how they were done. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, hit that subscription button to keep to support the channel, and ding that little bell for notifications of when future videos are uploaded. Thank you ever so much for joining me and for sticking through to this point of the video. Until next time, guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.